Welcome to our first TCC meeting of 2019. Before we begin, there's been a request to change the order of the agenda. We will be moving items 6.0 and 7.0 up before item 4.0, so please make note of that. All right, so let's start with quick introductions. Start to my left, please.
Kevin Rohani, City of Oakley.
Yvette Ortiz, City of El Cerrito and Big Tech.
Sean Hutchbeth, County Connection.
Steve Kurzvan, City of Brentwood.
Jerry Fay, Contra Costa County.
Heather Ballinger, City of Walnut Creek and City County Engineers.
Andy Smith, City of Walnut Creek and Transpac.
Andy Dillard, Tenant Danville and SWAT.
Paul Reinders, City of Pittsburgh Transplant.
Jason Chen, City of Orinda.
John Cunningham, Contra Costa County.
Leah Greenblatt, Wick Tech.
Lisa Bobadilla, Santa Mound SWAT.
Eileen Hernandez, SPART.
Stephanie Hughes, CCTA staff.
Matt Kelly, CCTA staff.
Ole Olson, Bike East Bay.
Galen McCoy, MTC. Tracy Croak, City of Antioch.
Okay, thank you all. So our next item is public comment. These are items that are not agendized. If anyone would like to speak from the public, please submit a speaker card. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the item C, approval of summary of actions from our TCC meeting of October 18th, 2018. Can I have a motion, please?
So move to approve. Second.
We'll go with Mr. Kurzvan and seconded by Mr. Fahey. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Moving on to our consent calendar, we will vote on items 1.0 through 3.0, all in one motion, unless there's anyone from the committee who would like to pull an item for discussion. Okay, seeing none, a motion.
Move to approve. What's the matter with it? Come on. Let's go.
Second? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Kurzvan, second by Fahey. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 6.0. This is an update on Senate Bill 743 and changes to the California Environmental Quality Act, the guidelines. Matt Kelly.
Thank you, Chair Dillard, and thanks for taking my items out of order, and to Stephanie for allowing me to do so I can get out of here. Not that I have anything against this group, I just have to be somewhere else. You're getting in my way. Yes, I'm here to discuss the updates to Senate Bill 743, and my notes seem to be missing right now. Stephanie, can I have you take your project monitoring item while I go get my notes?
Sure.
Sorry about that. Chair, can you? Yep, notes are missing.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry.
We'll go with which is. All right.
Is there anything that you need to?
So we'll go back to the first to item 4.0. Stephanie,
Yep.
Project monitoring report and update, please.
Okay, this is the monthly information item that appears in every TCC meeting. Just want to report out that most of the 18-19 projects have actually turned in their RFA. Most of them, there's a couple of them that's still working on it. However, there are also some that already received their E76s, so that's good news. Also, just a reminder for, if you look at the table on page 4-6, that is the fiscal year 1920 projects, which will have the RFA due November 1st of this year. And in the summertime, we work with MTC to come up with the obligation plan, which is the list of projects that will be guaranteed funding if you're on this list. And the way you make the list is MTC usually uses the project readiness as a factor, and how they measure that is the field review process. So if you have a project on this list, or your agency does, it would be a good idea to start that process, and by the summertime to at least have a field review schedule with Caltrans local assistance, or have already done the field review. And another note is about the inactive projects list, which is on page 4-13. As Caltrans updates this fairly regularly, I say maybe every other week, and MTC staff has also stepped up in contacting agencies if they fall on this list. Even though you see like the action by date is sort of in the horizon, the fact that your project is on this list means you have already missed the regional MTC deadline. So please be mindful and submit your invoices in a timely manner. Also would like to report out for HSIP Cycle 9 that our county received funding for 5 projects. So I'll be working with Concord County and Pittsburgh and San Pablo to program those in the TIP. And speaking about the TIP, the 2019 TIP was adopted in December. So if you look at FMS, for a while you saw like multiple duplicate listing because 2017 TIP was in active mode, and we were all working on the 2019 TIP update. So now that it's adopted, you should see a cleaner FMS when you log in. And if you need to make any modifications or amendments, please work with us to do that, so we can relay your request to MTC. And then lastly, just wanted to note or highlight, and you probably all know that we have new local assistance engineers from District 4. So we used to have Robert Krofel and Kevin Tran. Now it's Alan Wong and David Penn. I haven't actually met them. We're hoping CCTA staff will be able to meet with them in person, so we'll be more effective in trying to advocate for your project and help resolve any issues. So, and we can't do that if we don't know them personally. So we're working on meeting with them and hopefully establish a helpful working relationship so we can be helpful to you all. If they have questions, please let me know. If not, I'll hand it over back to Matt.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
Would you let us know after you contact the new area engineers so we know their contact, because we have some projects to
Okay.
engage with them?
Yeah, from what I understand, both of them have reached out to their new assignments, the people that they got assigned to. So if you haven't, we'll definitely follow up. Who did you used to have? Do you know?
Kevin Tran.
Okay. So I think you might have Alan Wong. Okay. If it's like, if they just took the respective replacements projects, but we can confirm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. So we will go back to item 6.0, an update on SB 743.
Thank you, Chair. Senate Bill 743, as you may recall, we've come to you a couple of times about this item. It was passed by state legislature back in September of 2013. Went through about 2.5 years of public comment, outreach by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. They presented various technical documents that were developed to kind of frame the issues around the Senate bill and to outline potential changes to CEQA guidelines, which is what Senate Bill 743 directly affects. OPR released a set of draft CEQA guidelines back in January of 2016. Those guidelines documented the removal of vehicle delay-based metrics, namely level of service, as a finding of significance for development and transportation projects under CEQA, both in transit priority areas, such as what we're in right now. And that would be effective immediately upon adoption of the guidelines, and then statewide after an opt-in period. The draft guidelines also identified vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, as the new metric to be analyzed under CEQA. They went through another round of public outreach and comments through 2016 and 2017. The refined guidelines were then transmitted to the Department of Natural Resources, where they go through the official rulemaking process. That started in November 2017. Natural Resources officially adopted the guidelines last month, December 28th, and those guidelines are in your packet. The final guidelines must be implemented statewide in areas outside of TPAs, transit priority areas, by July 1st, 2020. So that's the big target that should be on your calendar. Some notable items in the final guideline. There weren't a lot of changes, but there were some refinements and a few additions, but nothing that really changed the tone or the kind of concept that was adopted under SB 743. So the July 1st, 2020 date applies to the issuance of an EIR notice of preparation. So if your NOP goes out after July 1st, 2020, you must operate under the new guidelines. The projects that are in TPAs must use the new rules now because those guidelines have been adopted. The final guidelines confirm that capacity increasing transportation projects that were analyzed and cleared as part of a like the RTP EIR, MTC's RTP, or a specific plan EIR, you may tier off of that analysis. So basically your projects are cleared if they've been analyzed under those other under previous EIRs. The guidelines add flexibility to the lead agency in developing their thresholds of significance. So each lead agency is responsible for developing their own thresholds. And they have that flexibility as long as they provide justification for the chosen threshold and how it equates to the project having a less than significant impact. It also allows lead agencies to use a qualitative analysis of a project's VMT if you have a kind of a unique type of project where there just aren't appropriate tools available for quantitatively evaluating the VMT impacts. The guidelines expand upon the type of quantitative VMT analysis you can use. You can use absolute VMT increases or decreases from the project. You can use VMT per capita. You can use VMT per employee, per household, depending on the type of project that you're analyzing. It allows making adjustments to model outputs as long as you're using kind of established procedures and you justify it. The lead agency can justify the use of those adjustments. It encourages working with transit agencies when analyzing large projects, especially within transit priority areas, and working with those transit agencies to develop thresholds and mitigations. It also has new provisions for dealing with projects that may impact energy use, impact water supply or water quality, and also provides potential exemptions for projects that are dealing with disaster recovery or disaster planning and emergency repairs. So there's impact to the congestion management program due to these changes in CEQA. As of right now, level of service is what is required to be analyzed in the congestion management program. We do our level of service monitoring, which I'll get to in the next item. But they're both state requirements. So the state kind of needs to catch up with itself in terms of, not allowing not allowing level of service in CEQA, but requiring it in the CMP. So there was some legislation a couple of years ago by Bloom. I'm not sure who that, I think she's from Southern California. That legislation kind of stalled, and there's no current legislation to try and bring the two in parallel. But we think, or we've heard that OPR will kind of lead that change in legislation. So we'll be following that. There is a Bay Area CMA working group, or CMP working group of the CMAs that is tracking this and advocating for support from MTC, and we'll be writing some letters to promote the changes to the CMP. So MTC just sent us an email yesterday or the day before that says they have committed to some items that will basically provide more education, more tools. City of San Jose developed a VMT estimation tool that is applicable just to the city. VMT is now expanding it to Santa Clara County, and MTC is going to take it and expand it to the Bay Area. So that will be, I've seen the tool, as it is for San Jose, and it's really good. So hopefully they'll be able to make it just as applicable around the Bay Area. They're also going to create policy guidance for TDM ordinances, which will need to be updated, impact fee structures, and parking policies, which will all be affected by the changes to CEQA. MTC is going to kind of take some work that Sandag's doing right now down in San Diego. They received a Caltrans planning grant to develop mitigation strategies that are compliant with SB 743. So MTC will try and coordinate with them and bring some of those mitigation measures to the Bay Area and provide some examples of appropriate strategies for mitigation for projects. And then MTC is also committed to educating local jurisdiction legal staff using experience from cities that have already adopted VMT, including Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, and Pasadena. So that's an area that's kind of a gray area. The city planning staff and engineering staffs are learning about this, but we don't know whether the legal council is also up to speed on this. So this will help educate them. The authority role in this change, well, we started a couple years ago by just trying to educate the jurisdictions on the changes through TCC and through the RTPCs. And we also, as part of the action plan update process in 2016 and 2017, went to the RTPCs and talked about SB 743, how the action plans could be more compliant with the changes, and provided examples on multimodal routes of regional significance, new or alternate MTSOs, and appropriate actions to support those goals and objectives for each regional route. Many of you have probably attended our planning directors seminars that we've been having the last year or so. We've had 4 out of the 5 so far. Those are there basically to further educate staff on city staff on the changes from industry experts, and it's also helping authority staff develop a work plan for implementing SB 743 by July 1st of 2020. And some ways we may, some things that may be in our work plan that may assist you guys, maybe preparation of VMT heat maps, showing the locations of high and low VMT around the county, assistance in setting of the VMT thresholds, including establishing an average, a VMT average, either for the county, for the sub areas, or even at the city level. One size does not fit all in terms of an average for a county or even sub areas. We will probably be updating the growth management program implementation documents. That includes technical procedures and the implementation guide. And that could apply to general plan amendments, traffic impact reports, and the action plan performance measures, among others. And then we also think we'll end up, developing mitigation measures, and whether we work with MTC on that or kind of work by ourselves on that, we're not sure, but developing mitigation measures that make sense for Contra Costa for both development and transportation projects. And so we plan to work through you guys, the TCC, and the planning directors on this process. And also, we do have one city, Concord, who has just received a MTC planning grant for SB 743 implementation. So we think Concord will probably be taking the lead in the county in terms of making the transition to VMT probably before other folks. I don't see them here today, but they will be working on it over the next year. So hopefully we'll have some local experience before the implementation date. And that completes my item on SB 743. I can take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions, John?
Yeah, the SANDAG planning effort relative to VMT reduction strategies, is that something that's in process, or is it completed and done?
I don't think it's completed yet. I think it's in progress, but they're pretty close to completion. I don't know too much about it yet.
Okay. And one more, if I may. Is there a best resource that you know of that you could possibly email the group, or maybe it's just me, for conducting CEQA compliant traffic impact studies in this phase-in period, this interim period? It sounds like you hit on some critical points. Was that an OPR? Are those OPR recommendations, or?
Yeah, those are OPR. But I think those cities I mentioned, Oakland, Pasadena, San Jose, they probably have some good examples. But I can do some research and see if I can find anything.
Yeah, I don't mean to offload my research on you. I can take a look. I thought you might have something at hand that, this is the current Bible.
I don't.
Okay. Thank you.
We will be working on that, but I think in the meantime, looking at examples from those cities would probably be your best bet.
Matt, not to dive in the weeds on this, but I have a quick question. On page 12 of the document, it's 6-17. Under the criteria for analyzing transportation impacts, is there a definition of existing major transit stop?
Yeah.
Considering this under land use?
Yeah, MTC has provided a list of those facilities around the county. So, and we have that as well. I can
Like a predefined list of specific locations?
Yeah, it's basically transit facilities or lines, like bus lines, that have, they call it high quality, frequent service. I think it's 15-minute service. And the areas are within, like a half-mile radius of those locations. So, yeah, MTC has mapped those out.
Okay, thanks.
Follow-up. So that's for all the transit agencies, not just BART stations, but also like County Connection bus stops?
Right.
Oh, okay.
So like San Pablo Avenue, most of that whole corridor would fall into that.
And do you happen to know if it's 15-minute headways on a single route, or if there happens to be a large number of bus routes that have cruddy service, but if you add them together, it's every 15 minutes.
I think if they're on the same corridor, they'll combine them, but I don't know for sure. But they also include, ferry terminals, and ferry terminals generally don't have 15-minute service. So there's some oddities in there, but I can do a little more research on that.
Or maybe just send us the link to where the list is. That'd be very helpful, actually.
Okay.
I didn't know that happened.
Sure.
Thanks.
And just one other question I have, Matt. So our current action plans, this is to go into effect by 2020, and our action plans won't be updated by then, obviously. So, I mean, are they going to still be considered a valid tool for us to use? Or
Yeah, because we did the EIR for the countywide transportation plan in 2017, that clears those action plans. So the next update would have to incorporate the changes.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks for that update. Appreciate it. That will move us on to item 7.0. This is an action item. This is approval of work plan to update the congestion management program for 2019.
Thank you. I'll take this item as well. We come back to you every 2 years for this one. As the designated CMA for Contra Costa, we are required to update our congestion management program at least every 2 years. So that's what we do every odd year. The 2019 update will be our 14th. Just a little background on the CMP. I say this every time. The CMP legislation, which was adopted back in 1991, was based on our Measure C growth management program. It was kind of the model statewide. It became the model statewide. So for a lot of the requirements of the congestion management program, we defer to our growth management program. So when we update our CMP, we basically refer to the growth management program. So we treat it as kind of a technical update and just update sections that require updating and focus on things that actually need to be updated. And this year, those items, the main items are the level of service monitoring, as I mentioned earlier, and the capital improvement program. We're also planning on updating the, we have to demonstrate consistency with the RTP, which is Plan Bay Area 2040. We update our performance measures that our transit agencies use, so I'll be reaching out to the transit agencies to get their most recent performance measures. We bring in our performance measures from the CTP, the action plans, and other documents, the bike ped plan. Let's see, we are going to discuss issues related to SB 743 and how this document, the CMP, is not consistent with SB 743 and how we may move beyond that. And that's about it for what we're going to focus on. The first two I mentioned involve you guys, the level of service monitoring and the update of the capital improvement program. So for the monitoring, we will, I'm going to turn on the projector. So every other spring we go out and monitor the CMP network. The CMP network is composed of the state highway routes that you see in blue, basically the freeways, and 65 intersections around the county. You'll find that they're clustered in West, Central, and East County. And Loma Linda, or the SWAT sub-area, doesn't have any CMP intersections. They could add them if they wanted to, but they don't have to, and I don't see why they would at this point. We will be going out basically in the February to April timeframe and doing intersection level of service monitoring. We also collect bike and ped counts, and we, as you know, we do it on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. No construction, no rain. Schools must be in session, so we look at all the calendars and come up with dates that work best. We will work with you, the local jurisdictions, as much as we can to let you know where we're going to be and when. We know of at least 5 jurisdictions that require encroachment permits for, these days a lot of the monitoring is not really done with tube counters anymore. It's mostly cameras mounted and, videotaping the intersections, and then sometimes it's the cameras or the software can do the counts on its own. Sometimes it's brought back to the office and the counters, look at the video. So we do need to get encroachment permits with at least 5 jurisdictions, as I mentioned, that we know of. That's Caltrans, City of Concord, City of Hercules, City of Pittsburgh, and City of Walnut Creek. If there are others, you can let me know either now or by email, and I will make sure that the traffic counting firms go through your process, your permit process. What we do ask is that you approve the permits in a timely manner and that you waive the charge. So if you have any issues with that, please let me know. We also provide this data back to you, so we feel it's kind of a quid pro quo for collecting and then sharing the data. As I mentioned, that will be going on February through April, hopefully, unless we have to do recounts. And we hopefully we'll provide a draft monitoring report in the June-July timeframe. Also, as I mentioned, the CIP update, the Capital Improvement Program, you've done that in the past through a variety of methods. We had the CTPL update.net website that you guys, most of you are probably familiar with. That was where you updated our CTPL through the internet. We lost that website. Basically, the person who supported the company who supported it retired. It was an individual, so we no longer have access to that website. So we are in the process of revamping our CTPL, our Comprehensive Transportation Project listing, into a new database that will have a internet component. So we will, come April, be asking you to update all of your projects. We'll port over all the existing information into the new database, provide passwords and access to the database, and then ask you to update as much as you possibly can. We're still in internal discussions on this, but we just found out that the MTC will be having their RTP call for projects around the same time, so we may use that project update period as a time for you guys to update for both the CMP, CIP, and the RTP call for projects. But we'll provide you more information on that as the database is complete, and we hope to have that ready by April. Basically, as far as schedule goes, as I mentioned, spring we will be monitoring the network. April through May, we'll have you update your projects for the CIP. MTC will be releasing their CMP guidelines in May. We don't think that will affect anything. Basically, CMP and all the CMAs have agreed that this is not the time to add any new requirements to the CMP because of the SB 743 and level of service issue. Keep things as is, and once the state is caught up with themselves, then we'll make some changes to the CMP guidelines. We'll hopefully have a draft released in July, and a monitoring report released at that time as well. The draft will be out for review August through September. In October, we'll have a revised draft, submit it to MDC for comment, and then adoption in December. So that's the work plan for the 2019 CMP. I can take any questions.
Chair. Hi, I've got a couple questions. Regarding the CMP monitoring, the intersections, in the staff report it says that we're collecting the ped bike data, but it won't be analyzed.
Yeah, we aren't doing multimodal level of service analysis for bikes and peds. We're collecting approach volumes. But it's a really good way to look at growth or change in bike and ped volumes over time at those locations.
So I guess that was sort of my question. Like, what are you going to, if we're collecting it, what are we going to do with it?
Use it to track changes over time.
Okay.
If you guys, if individual cities or agencies want to do multimodal level of service, which is kind of a big exercise, you can definitely use that data as the inputs. But for now, we're just using it to track changes over time.
Okay. And then I noticed that for the intersections, I didn't see anything along the Richmond Parkway.
Right. Let's see. I don't believe there are any. And that basically the network was adopted back in '91 and hasn't changed since. So if they weren't part of the network then, they aren't now. We do have those intersections as part of the MTSO monitoring, but not for the CMP monitoring.
And I understand from the county that there's a lot of development that's occurring along that.
Yeah.
Is it just because it wasn't in, how many years ago? Is there a reason, should we be recommending modification to the network?
Well, once you're part of the CMP network, you're subject to CMP requirements, which involve deficiency plans. Anytime you exceed your level of service standard, there's a lot of requirements that basically some jurisdictions don't want to deal with. That's why SWAT hasn't added jurisdictions since. And if Richmond or the county is interested in opting in for those intersections, we could definitely approach that, but they aren't a part of our adopted CMP network.
I don't know if the Richmond engineers realize that. Have you had that conversation with them?
Not specifically. We haven't approached jurisdictions and asked them if they want to expand. I mean, when we go out every 2 years, we kind of explain the process, and no one's requested that we.
So is there any upside for being on the CMP network?
The upside is that you get the monitoring every 2 years, and if you have a need for that. Generally, if cities have a need for it and it's not part of the CMP, they're doing it themselves. And with level of service, we think eventually being removed from the CMP, we probably wouldn't encourage it right now. But if that want or need is there, we can certainly address that. It's probably a little too late for this round, but if level of service monitoring is still in the CMP in 2021, we could approach it then.
Okay. And then I just had one more question about the CIP project list. And you listed some of the possible sources, I guess, for projects. Could that also include local plans that are just local plans or local plans developed by the RTPCs too?
Definitely, as long as they have a sponsor and a description and a dollar amount, you can add them to the CTPL. And basically, we encourage any project that is going to be seeking funding in the next 7 years should be in that document.
That's all I got.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Thanks, Matt. So this is an action item. We're looking for approval of the scope and schedule. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Thanks.
For the record, motion by John Cunningham and second by Paul Reinders. Okay, moving on to our, well, not our last item, but close to last, 5.0. This is a Measure J Local Agency Coordination Guide. These are an update on proposed changes to the formation process for peer review committee. This is an informational item. Stephanie?
Yes. Hi. This is, again, an information item, so no actions needed on your end, but we wanted to let you know some changes that staff or authorities proposing for how we form peer review committees for Measure J projects. So as you know, project sponsor receiving Measure J funds have to comply with the policy and procedures in the local agency coordination guide, and that can be found on our website if you have not ever seen it. But if you have received funding from us, I'm sure you or your staff member have. So one requirement in the guide that's listed is a peer review process, and it can be found in section 4.2 of the guide. Peer reviews are required for projects with total construction cost over $500,000, with exceptions of projects on BART properties and also major highway projects on Caltrans right-of-way, because both BART and Caltrans have their own peer review or review process, and we're confident that their own design standards are met through their own process internally. Our own project peer reviews are done at 65% design completion and 95% completion, though oftentimes the peer review committees have waived a 95% depending on the complexity of the project as well as the quality of 65% set of plans. So earlier in the meeting, you guys all approved a 65% peer review for Camino Tasajara bike lane. So that's what we're talking about. So currently, the peer review committees have been formed by volunteers from City and County Engineering Advisory Committee, which is CCEAC, and Heather is the representative from the group. And that group consists of mainly city and county staff members. However, to address the latest construction techniques and new technologies that we are facing in the future transportation projects, Authority feels the need and proposes to modify the language in the guide to include, to have the committee be formed by people who are not necessarily a member of CCAC. So in attachment B, you'll see the red line, or well, it's not color, but the strikeout revisions to section 4.2, which basically deletes language that say the peer review committee is going to be solely from members of CCEAC, and that it can be opened up to other transportation professionals or specialists. And I also wanted to note that Resolution 1338P authorizes the executive director to make any changes to the guide as he sees appropriate, and this is a case we feel like it's a need that we need to change. Again, this is an informational item, but we're happy to take any feedback with the peer review committee process or any questions that you may have. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I have a question. So I assume the need for this came because the city county engineers is too limited in certain cases? Is that?
Yeah, I feel like we've come to realize some projects that could use more expertise in the review process. For example, we had a roundabout project in Lafayette a couple years ago. It's done now, but we've heard, some feedback about maybe getting more feedback from bicycle communities, or even people who are more professional, who have more expertise in roundabout designs. Because for that peer review, I don't remember who they were, but they were from our peers in the county with the county. I don't know if it's county staff or city staff, but it might be beneficial if we had a design engineer whose expertise is in roundabout design, for example. That's just something that we've heard. So not to say that the members of CCAC are not experts on engineering or construction, but as you know, on the CSAC group, there's also a lot of consultants actually. We both go there and go to the meetings, and I don't think this will cause any major changes, because actually we do have consultants that volunteer. We're maintaining the requirement that the letter that certifies that the process happens still come from a public agency staff. So that will stay the same. So you're not going to have the whole peer review group of just consultants or non-public agency staff. So that doesn't change.
The phrase that other transportation industry professionals and specialists is kind of broad.
Right.
So, could a transportation planner now sit on this, or like you indicated that it could be a member of the community?
Yeah, I think we just have to look at it case by case with the project.
But how do you know that the person has the technical expertise, and is it just an interested party?
So usually how we start the peer review process is the sponsor engages us in saying, we're about to come in for appropriation, we're a 65% design, please help us form a peer review committee. So at that point, I normally reach out to the CSAC group, and I normally send, along with the email, a description of the project. So, people know what they're signing up for. So if you're like a structural engineer, you're not going to volunteer for a pavement rehab job. You kind of know what you're volunteering for, and that's been working. If the project requires specific knowledge on a particular design aspect of the project, then normally I highlight that. Like, this project has a retaining wall. It'd be useful if people who have the experience volunteer for this peer review process.
Right, but how are you going to identify who the transportation people
I think when they do volunteer, then obviously if it's not apparent, we will make sure to do due diligence and make sure they are equipped with knowledge and expertise for that particular project.
But if you're only telling the city county engineers group, how are you getting this wider?
I think in that case, for example, for this one we just had, because it's a bike lane project, we actually reached out to Bike East Bay and Dave Campbell's. I mean, he wasn't officially a committee member, but he was in the room to provide feedback. So I think even with meeting different people with different venues, we can reach out to people we think would be beneficial to be on the committee. But we will still first go through CCAC. And like I said, there's actually a lot of consultants in that group. I'm sure now that this is not, an actual policy, those who are in the committee would be able to volunteer their own staff in their company that would be a good asset to the review process for that, whatever the project may be. So hopefully that answers it.
Well, it answers it, but it sounds like it could be very arbitrary.
That's not what we're hoping for, but I don't think that will happen. I think with those in the office who have experience with other consultants, we could probably also identify people who would be helpful in reviewing projects.
I guess along those same lines, I kind of have that same concern, just in terms of, I assume you'll be coordinating with whoever the agency is that's needing the peer review. So before you went out and reached this broader
Oh, yeah,
spectrum of people,
right.
you'd be talking to the agency and saying, hey,
Correct.
might it be a good idea if we had the bike
Yes.
person on the,
So for this particular one, for the county, I actually talked to Jerry, if you recall, that, by the way, Dave Campbell's interested actually in providing some feedback, and so we do forewarn or let the project sponsor know that, these are the people who are going to be on the peer review if it's not usual, but normally, it's usually just local agency staff. And then if there's a unique person that's not normally there, we do let them know so they're prepared.
I guess along those lines, we met with Dave Campbell a year ago on our roundabout. So, so he provided some feedback at that point. And for example, provide bike lanes throughout the roundabout. So that's an additional, if you think about it, it's an additional 4 to 5 feet all the way
Are
around.
you talking about this was not a roundabout? Are you talking about this particular project?
You'll soon be doing our 65% for our roundabout.
We haven't done a 65.
It's coming.
Oh, it's coming. Okay.
So Dave's going to look at that and say, hey, I made comments on this. You guys should have a bike lane through this roundabout. The footprint of that roundabout gets much larger based on that comment, which right away, I guess I don't want to be in a position where we're looking at the comments from that 65 and suddenly having to go back to the drawing board, going back to right away. It could really steamroll up that project and put the brakes on it.
Oh, yeah, no, we understood that, and I think our feedback we're using this as an example, so it's not going to be always bike advocates or bike groups, but in particular instance, we did let Dave know that if he or the group wants to make these changes, they need to engage the project sponsor early on. It cannot be a 65% design, because at that point, things are set. There's no way you're going to add a larger footprint or scope to the project. So he understood that, and it sounds like you guys do meet with him regularly to update him on projects around the county that involve bike lanes or bike facilities. So we're hoping this isn't going to, add more headaches or, but I think it could be beneficial. It would be beneficial for more eyes on the project, or even just second pair of eyes to just check things that maybe we will miss. So, yes.
And just to emphasize that point, it is reassuring that you'll reach out to the jurisdiction, but it's
Yes.
important to note that there's local policy decisions made that these projects end up in our capital programs.
Correct.
And decisions have been made already, and this is on to the design. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't undermine that process.
No, not at all. And I don't anticipate any, I think from my experience coordinating the committees, it often involve one consultant, because they are so, they do go to CSAC. So, and they get all the emails, and I can't reject them. I can't say you cannot be in the committee, because they are part of CSAC. They are in the CSAC, they are a member, so I couldn't deny them the opportunity to be a peer review in the committee, but I do require at least one person on the committee be a public agency staff, just because we need that letter to be from a public agency. So we're hopeful that this would actually be beneficial in the review process. Yes, so yeah.
yeah, not to beat a dead horse here, because I think you get the idea, but I don't think it's the, but I'm going to do it. Thank you. Yeah, it's not the consultants that we're talking about. It's
I
just-
understand, yes.
It's just we don't want project
Right.
scope slipping and,
Correct.
turning into project creep,
Yes, we understood that. I think that was just one small example, but going back to the roundabout, I think for that particular project, I think it would be nice if we had even other consultants who have a lot of experience designing roundabouts versus just an engineer from a city that have never done a roundabout. So I think, yeah.
Okay, any other comments? All right, thanks, Stephanie. That takes us to item 8.0, other business. Is there any other business that the committee would like to bring up? No? Okay, seeing none, takes us to adjournment to Thursday, February 21, 2:30 PM. Thank you.
I heard a new buzzword, shared micro-mobility.
Shared
Scooters. Shared micro-mobility.
Is that what?